Well, welcome to our discussion about the 2023 Annual Action Plan for Harris County. Welcome. We'd love to be able to get to know people that are connecting with us today online. So if you wanted to pull out your phones and go to our QR code that we see right here, this is the slido.com. It's also under hashtag 2023 AAP. So if you wanted to click there, or the web address will also be pasted into the chat as well. So with this, go ahead and use your phone. You can click on the QR code above. And with that, we just wanted to ask you just something in general. What is your favorite thing about Harris County? So feel free to just go ahead and post that on there real quick. Anything, it doesn't have to be planning oriented or housing oriented. Just happy to hear some feedback from each of you to think what it is that you see as your favorite thing. We'll give that about another 10 seconds. All right. Let's go ahead and see a few of our results that we have on here. Some people are finishing typing up. Let's see here. All right, so especially diversity and the diversity, all right, as well as food and winter, which I don't think is an actual thing in the area, but if we want to call that winter, I'm sure we can let that count. Absolutely, I think once we had snow. So with that, seeing, I think one more person is throwing in there, and we'll be sure to find out a little bit more as well. So we want to then go on to getting a little bit of information about what we are doing and what is our purpose of what we're discussing here today. So our agenda is going to be our vision, goals, and how we're going to be utilizing entitlement funds to achieve this vision and these goals. We also then want to show you a bit about how the consolidated plan as a whole, 5 years, is able to then connect with each of our annual action plans. We want to make sure that we also have feedback from you, the community, to let us know what you're thinking and how you're reflecting on what we're sharing, as well as making sure that you have the opportunity to give any final remarks as well. We're really glad that you're here, and we want to be able to hear more about what you see and what you connect with in our presentation as well. Now, our vision is to be able to provide affordable homes, better infrastructure, services that are needed within each neighborhood, as well as supportive services for individuals, as well as a stronger community economic development for Harris County, specifically in our service area. So while we do overlap with specific incorporated cities, we do understand that there is some area that we focus on for our entitlement funding. Now, with that, the Harris County Community Services focuses on using the data that we have to use local, state, and federal funding in ways that are transparent, timely, reliable, but especially equitable, so that we can create and execute various programs for services, affordable and resilient housing, disaster recovery, transit, not just especially for the entire community, but especially we want to focus on those who are low income, the elderly, those who are homeless, people who are disabled, those who are oftentimes underrepresented in our community. Now, we are currently going through some organizational restructuring, and this will be updated soon. But what we see is that there are 5 major parts to our department. We see our housing and community development, which includes planning and development, which is joining you today. Looking at our housing programs, as well as what we're going to be utilizing the Treasury ARPA funding for. Now, this is also going to connect with our community services, which you can see listed there is connected with a lot of what we're doing for public services in our discussion today. But disaster recovery and resiliency is also able to utilize additional funding to solve some of the issues that we see. Finance and operations play a key role in how we accomplish this as a whole. Now, I mentioned a moment ago that Harris County's service area is what we focus on. Now, whereas larger incorporated cities like Houston, Baytown, Pasadena they're able to receive their own entitlement funds from HUD, and they're able to utilize them because they are large enough as incorporated cities. But in addition to the unincorporated parts of Harris County, we're also able to work with cooperative cities who have signed on 3 years at a time with us to utilize a joint connection for CDBG funding. So with that, we're able to work with Deer Park, Galena Park, Humble, Jacinto City, Katy, LaPorte, Morgan's Point, Seabrook, Shore Acres, South Houston, Tomball, and Webster to apply for entitlement funding from HUD. Now, what are entitlement programs? Well, entitlement programs are able to provide annual grants to cities, counties, and cooperating communities for viable urban communities that have decent housing, suitable living environments, and an expanding economic opportunity. Now, this is a formula basis, so depending on how many entitlement communities are applying, as well as the populations of each of those entitlement communities, there's a formula that is used in order to understand how much is allotted to each of these communities. Now, this will be home funding, CDBG, as well as ESG. And that's why it is that it's important for us to team up with cooperative cities for representation for Harris County. Our consolidated plan is a 5-year plan that's able to emphasize the priorities of community development and the multi-year goals that we have. This is not only going to assess our needs with housing and community development, but also the market conditions and what resources that we have available. Now, keep in mind that with a 5-year plan, it's important to identify what we're going to be doing with each year within it. Our annual action plan is showing how we're going to carry out the actions, activities, and grants that we have for each of these years in order to address the needs and the goals from the consolidated plan. And for the sake of accountability, also keep in mind that we have the CAPER, the Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report, that helps us to explain what we have done each year toward our consolidated plan goals. These goals that we have include home ownership, helping those who are renters, dealing with the needs of those who are facing homelessness, working on public facilities and infrastructure, providing the services that are needed by the public, as well as acknowledging that there is a need for economic development and other needs within the community. While our funding with entitlement funds don't go specifically to economic development, it is one of our overall focuses and goals with the consolidated plan. Now, this action plan that we are looking at is going to be starting on October 1st of 2023, and it will end on September 30th of 2024. Be aware that this is the 5th and final year of the current consolidated plan. As we are developing this annual action plan, which is the reason why you are joining us today, is in order to solicit and select the best activities that are needed for the community. We want to make sure that we provide opportunities for you to participate. We want to make sure that there are public hearings, including with Commissioners Court, for you to know what it is that we are doing and to be able to contribute in order to explain more of your concerns and what it is that you see yourself as a part of the community before we submit that plan to HUD and achieve its approval. Now, this is where we are coming from when we are looking at the 2023 annual action plan. As you see, with the combination of community development block grants, home investment funding, as well as ESG, what we're able to see then is a combination of $21.4 million that can be used for entitlement funding for this 5th year in the consolidated plan. This is where you come in. We want to find out from you how you view the ways that we are prioritizing different activities and different goals within our annual action plan, getting towards our overall consolidated plan priorities. So with that, we want to look at each of these categories one at a time and show you what we've been doing and find out from you, what do you think? Our first area that we see is homelessness. Now, we realize that there have been various needs in Harris County, and with the Home ARP report that was put out 2 years ago, we're able to see that we have a current gap of 1,900 permanent supportive housing units for single adults and youth. What we realize is that for those who are homeless, there is oftentimes a need to get them into housing as quickly as possible in order to break this cycle. This is rapid rehousing. What we see then is there's also housing that is used to put them into permanent supportive housing. Permanent supportive housing being the kind that allows not only for a place for someone to live, but also make sure that they have the services that they need to thrive and to continue to stay out of homelessness going forward. That's also why we have bridge to permanent supportive housing as well. So with these needs, we also want to make sure we provide services to divert and prevent homelessness in the first place. So for that, what we have seen is for 2019 through 2021, we have had a funding of $10.4 million that has gone toward homeless street outreach, homeless prevention, and rapid rehousing. There is also a need for emergency housing and shelter as well. What we then see then is for 2022, which we are currently in, we have had a funding of $1.1 million. So what we would like from you is to find out, how do you see the ranking of each of these particular aspects? So let's go to that particular poll. How should we rank the importance of each activity under homelessness? So take a moment, use your Slido, go ahead and pull up that particular survey and let us know, how do you see the importance of each of these aspects, each of these issues under homelessness? Let's take about 15 seconds. All right, we'll go ahead and give everybody just a few more seconds and then be able to finish up. All right, and almost done. Great. Let's go ahead and show our results that we have. All right, it shows that people are especially focused on homeless prevention, also recognizing the need for rapid rehousing as well. We see that emergency transition housing is needed. Now, the street outreach is still important, but definitely wanting to make sure that we have prevention as our topmost issue. And notice for the homeless management information system, there is different funding that goes toward this in regard to the Coalition for the Homeless, which is our continuum of care for Harris County, Montgomery County, and Fort Bend County. Now, let's look a little bit at what we see then for the issue of housing, but also we want to make sure we get a little bit of feedback from you, because we want to find out, are there other activities besides these 5 that we need to pursue in order to reduce homelessness in Harris County? So if you see something you want to make sure we put up there, go ahead and place it there, and we'll go ahead and see any results here below. And feel free to put down whatever it is you're thinking. These are coming across anonymously, so we want to make sure that everyone feels free to share what is on their mind. So we're taking note of programming that is geared towards youth, barrier busting, funding toward that as well. Notice the transitional housing for people that are coming from jail. Oftentimes they may find themselves on the street, or especially struggling because of issues with employment. Wraparound services that will be needed, that also comes up in regard to our school districts. More prevention funding, but also more prevention projects. So not just what is currently being done, but realizing that there may be some other things outside of the box that could be needed here. New affordable housing units. You can't deal with homelessness unless you're able to get people off the streets. Absolutely. The need for healthy food. Nutrition becomes a major issue for people who have been struggling with this. Permanent supportive housing along with mental health services and affordable housing as well. Fortunately, mental health services continue to be prioritized, especially with our public services. Job training and placement programs, which we will be seeing under the general services that we see later in today's slides. Reentry housing, as well as emergency rental assistance. So realizing that oftentimes there may be a delay in getting people into rental housing. And we may have a little bit more, but let's also make sure we continue to go forward and understand a bit more about our presentation that we have. Now, in addition to homelessness, what we have seen is issues that are coming up in regard to housing. Now, as far as what we see with housing, there is going to be a general issue of people paying way too much for housing, which should generally be between 30% and a third of a household's monthly income. Now, what we're going to see then is that we're going to need more housing over the next 10 years, over 38,000 for renters, over 6,000 for homeowners. Now, this is in addition to additional housing that's going to be needed for people moving to the Harris County area. Now, what we see then here is that this demand is especially going to be strong in the 0 to 30% median household income categories, as well as the 30 to 60% median household income categories. So with that, what we're able to see then is that if there is more housing provided for people in those income brackets, then that way they will not have to pay higher wages for more expensive housing, which means that for the 60 to 80% median household income, there will be more housing available, which is why we don't see a major shortage in that area that would need to be resolved if the first two are taken care of. But also, it's important for us to note the need for housing rehabilitation, especially after the natural disasters that we have suffered over the last 6 or so years. Noticing that a quarter of the respondents had been damaged by flooding at some point in the previous 5 years. And we see that even 35% of the residents had not yet completed repairs. They were waiting because they cannot afford to bear the expense. Now, what we want to see then is a bit about what has gone towards this, not only for home ownership, but also for housing rentals. Let's start with the home ownership aspect of this. So what we see is that for 2019 through 2021, we were putting $28.6 million into home ownership, single family rehabilitation, as well as lead-based paint abatement. Now notice the funding for new construction. This comes from other sources, not entitlement funding. So we'll be able to see that is happening, but in other parts of the county. Now we also have 3.2 million allotted for this current year, 2022. So why don't you go ahead and give us some feedback of your own? What do you see as the ranking in importance of each of these issues under housing? So for home ownership, how should we rank the importance of each activity under housing for owners? So go ahead and use your Slido. Go ahead and put on there, how do you see the ranking of importance for activities under home ownership? Whether this is down payment assistance, as far as getting people directly into housing itself. Do you believe that we should be utilizing entitlement funding to go towards more new construction? Whether we're looking at rehab or whether we're looking at dealing with lead-based paint abatement. So how do you see the importance of ranking each of these activities under home ownership? All right, we'll give it about another 5 seconds. And let's start taking a look at our results. So even with money going towards new construction from various sources, it is still seen as a very important issue, especially since we're looking at the need for an additional 200,000 units in Harris County over the next decade because of incoming residents into the Harris County area over the next decade. Home ownership is still a major issue, looking at down payment assistance as well as closing costs. This also then pertains with issues that come up with the CLT as well, the Community Land Trust. Single family home rehab, there are various partners within the community who are willing and able to be a part of that effort within our area, but then also still seeing lead-based paint as being something that needs to be tackled as well, right? So it looks like also homeownership has taken the lead. Congratulations, homeownership. Now, in addition to this, what are some other activities that you believe we should be currently doing that would help to pursue homeownership in this county? So are there any things that we did not list, things that you see that would be helpful as far as what we are doing and how to make things more available for homeownership and more attainable? What do you see going forward? And right there in the center, smaller homes, especially with issues that come up in regard to minimum lot size, building standards, what is or is not allowed within current regulations. Also focusing on infill, we realize that there have been a lot of areas that were developed with larger lots, but fewer houses and fewer units. So how can we actually utilize infill principles to make sure that we're providing more housing in the space that we have? And then also realizing that there may be some other solutions that we haven't used yet. So we may have some current things that we're doing in the area, but if we had more types of housing that were available, could this be something that we could actually make more available to our community? We should also recognize multifamily issues, weatherization, subdividing the lots. That's come up quite a bit in some of our areas where we see a lot more concentration of people living in them, but also realizing that there are a lot of families that are currently living in the same houses. So how can we provide opportunities for people to be able to live in a more attainable way, a more sustainable way, but then also long-term affordability? How many people are being pushed out of their homes because of issues that come up in regard to property taxes or skyrocketing housing prices in the first place? Not just home ownership, but also when we look at rentals in just a moment. So long-term affordability, definitely key. So we're definitely happy to continue to get some more feedback on that. Let's take a look in regard to equitable access, and let's see what we have with our rentals as well. Now, with our renters, we see that we have $17.3 million that have been put towards new construction. This would be new construction of multifamily units, so complexes and the like. We also had 420,000 for lead-based paint abatement and TBRA, tenant-based rental assistance. We've had 4.2 million for those 3 years of 2019 to 2021. Now for the current year, we've had 2.5 million in funding that has gone toward that. So let's find out from you, the community, how do you see the ranking that we have? While multifamily rehabilitation can come from other sources, do you think that that's something that we should have prioritized in regard to what we're doing with entitlement funding? So let's take a look at that here. How should we rank the importance of each activity under housing for renters? So go ahead and pull out your slide up. Go ahead and let us know, what do you see as the importance, how we should rank them for each activity under housing for renters? So we'll go ahead and take a few moments. Let's have another maybe 10, 15 seconds. We'll find out from you, what do you see as important for housing for renters? So go ahead and rank them. Most important, number one, not as important, down at the bottom. We'll give about 5 more seconds. All right, let's see what we have at this point. The results that we have so far. As much as new construction for single family has been very good, at the same time, multifamily construction is going to be needed to deal with the massive influx of residents that will be coming into Harris County over this next decade, as well as resolving the issues that we currently see as well. But rental can be very, very expensive. And we see that rental assistance is going to be needed there as well. Acquisition and rehab. There are places that maybe they're naturally occurring affordable housing, but over the next few years, they may not be affordable anymore. So are there ways that we could acquire and then rehab those places to keep them affordable for the foreseeable future? And then, of course, dealing with lead-based paint will always need to be a priority from housing older than 1978 and so forth. Now, let's find out from you, are there other avenues that we should consider, other avenues that we should pursue for attaining rental housing that's affordable in this particular area, right? Some things that we didn't prioritize previously. Type in any of your thoughts, totally anonymous. Happy to find out from you. So looking at whether rentals have price caps, this is something that oftentimes in Houston and Harris County can be such a hurdle because of those who are saying, well, but if there's a price cap, would that cause issues for managers or the owners or all of those who are benefiting from this? At the same time, it is something that does need to be discussed and looked at as a viable solution. Now, could these rental units be mixed use? Does it all have to be specifically utilized for multifamily? Are there other options that could be used for these rentals as well? Could they even be used beyond just the homeowners themselves? Um, could we be looking at more subsidization? Now, in regard to each of these things for 811, how it is that we're able to utilize that number, but not only making sure that people know that they can use it, but also, is there a high enough response time? Is it quickly enough? Interestingly, is that in the past, hotels had been utilized for affordable rental housing when people had first moved to a community. So whereas that is not currently a part of the model of the Harris County area, is there a way to do something comparable? Even being able to provide something that is affordable on a week-to-week basis rather than just waiting for month to month. And then continuing to look at subsidization and infill of properties. Now, let's look a little bit going further in some of our topics that we had. So in addition to rental housing, what about public facilities and infrastructure? What we see is that there has been disproportionately low access to parks and recreation for lower income communities, especially because Harris County neighborhoods were not built with pedestrians in mind, those who do not have readily accessible cars, autos, and the like. We see that a lot of the water lines that have been leaking in Harris County are 30 to 40 years old. They need to be replaced. And we realize that there has been not only a lot of reliance on water and sewer lines that are aging, but also that there's been a dependence on shallow water wells and ailing septic tanks. So what we see here is that the total funding from 2019 through 2021 has been $40.7 million. Now, the bulk of this has gone towards water and sewer improvements, 29.5 million. Notice that within these, we did not have funding that went towards senior centers. Now for 2022, currently, we have 7.8 million that has gone towards funding for public facilities and infrastructure. So let's find out from you. How do you see the ranking that we have for these categories? Let's find out a bit about how should we rank the importance of each activity under public facilities and infrastructure. So go ahead and use your Slido code. Snap up here with your QR code. It's 2023 AAP, if you would like to type that in as well. And let us know with those 8 categories, what do you see as most important, least important? And this is not saying that any of them are unimportant at all. But go ahead and put what do you see as first and foremost, okay? And nobody can trace any of this back to you. It's completely anonymous, so feel free to put in there what you wish. And afterwards, we'll also make sure that there is space for free response as well. Okay? So let's give it just maybe another 5 seconds. How do you see the ranking of public facilities and infrastructure activities? What is most important that you see that we would need to prioritize here with Harris County? So let's take a look at the 3, 2, and 1, right? So what results do we have? Flood and drain improvements, as well as water and sewer improvements, are at the top, which makes a lot of sense for Houston, Harris County. Now, in addition to this, we see that there have been issues that are needed to be resolved for street improvements. Now, this is in addition to sidewalks, pathways, and parks and rec facilities as well. There was recently a man who stood in a hole up to his waist and realizing the need for things like this to be repaired. Now, in addition to sidewalks and pathways, street improvements, we also see more neighborhood and social service facilities. So this is separate from the services that are provided at those facilities and beyond. So we do need more of the social service facilities themselves, parks and rec facilities. But notice also that while we have put money towards youth centers, there's also a consideration of whether we should put money towards senior centers, or is there already funding that is going towards that is meeting those needs as it is. So with that, we've had a chance to see how you would rank the importance of each of these activities, but at the same time, what other public facilities or infrastructure improvements do you think we should be considering? Are there some things we did not list within those rankings that you think should come about that should be in our area? Actual built infrastructure. So notice this is going to be different from the services themselves, which will be the following category. Okay. So now green infrastructure. Now that doesn't mean that we need a whole bunch of green paint. We want to make sure that we have a lot of infrastructure that's considered not just on being friendly to the environment, but also conducive to what we see as our natural resources around us, making sure that it not only works well aesthetically, but also actually environmentally as well. Now, keeping in mind internet, do we have broadband access that is available throughout our entire service area? Or is this something that is still a struggle for areas that are low income, maybe underrepresented? Now, do we need to evaluate our bus stops? Do we need to identify whether or not they're in the right locations or whether they need to be improved themselves? But then also, are there centers where people who are homeless can just drop in? If people are saying that people should not be out on the streets, well, where can they actually go? Are there places that they can consider to be safe havens for themselves? So seeing how can we think outside the box on facilities and infrastructure that are needed for this community. And yes, parks are definitely important, especially since we realize that the need not just for green space, but actually contiguous foliage to make sure that there are actually tree lines that are connected throughout our county area. Now, let's take a look, going a little bit further. In addition to facilities and infrastructure, we also see the need for public services themselves. We realize that a quarter of low-income households in our service area have at least one elderly individual who will need senior services, but also realizing that 11% of those below the poverty level are struggling with disability. Now, there's also drug usage and alcohol usage among minors, and then also dealing with issues of domestic violence in the area, which has increased after COVID. Now, also notice the picture, public transit that is in the area. Make sure that we're continuing to provide that for seniors and people with disabilities in our area. Now, for that, we have had 7.6 million in 2019 through 2021 that has gone towards 6 of these 9 categories. So realizing that within general services, we are able to see issues that are able to come up with not only looking at development of job training, but also even seeing things that come up for neighborhood cleanup, housing counseling, food and clothing distribution. In general, these are services that don't fall under the other ones that are identified below, but they are still important, things that need to be dealt with. Okay. Now, in addition to that, youth services target age groups from 5 to 19 years of age for the purpose of enriching, protecting, and improving the lives of children and youth. And this is on top of childcare that is also a supportive service as well. Now, we also see that there is going to be counseling, after school programs, sports and recreation programs, education tutoring, life skills, drug and alcohol education, much of the like. Transportation services are going to be focusing on the transit that is being provided. So while Metro, the bus system and the transit doesn't necessarily connect with all the parts of our service area, we are providing with our rides program, making sure that we have transit opportunities for those who are in need. Now, notice that through these particular funding sources, we're not focused on disabilities, services for disabilities beyond transit. We're not focused on crime prevention and juvenile justice, as well as those who are living with HIV and AIDS. Now, our current funding, 2.1 million, is going towards public services. Notice that public services cannot go above 15% of CDBG funding. So what do you see as important to prioritize with each of these areas? Okay, so how do you see this? How should we rank the importance of each activity under public services? Okay, and notice that transit is not just getting to medical facilities, but it can also be getting to these other social services, even providing access to Texas Medical Center downtown, or even just food in general. So go ahead and take a few more seconds. How do you see the ranking for each of these? How do you see what is most important? How do you want to continue to promote these in our area? Okay, so each of these are important. We have 9 different areas, 3 of which do not get funding from entitlement per se, as much as from other sources. How do you see the need to prioritize each of these? All right, let's give it about 5 more seconds. Let everybody have a chance to rank what they have. So finishing up with this in 3, 2, 1. So as you're continuing to finish up your feedback, notice that transportation has ranked up at the top, in addition to health services and general services. General has taken the lead. Now currently, with general services, we do include areas like job training and the like, which is important, but notice that there are some things that just don't fit the other categories specifically. Now, we're also seeing the need for youth services, childcare, as well as for those with disabilities. So while it's not funding with these particular sources, we do need to find ways to make sure that it is a priority. Senior services, children that are neglected and abused, as well as realizing the needs for those who have HIV and AIDS, as well as issues with crime awareness and juvenile justice. Okay. So we see how these can fit together with our priorities for entitlement funding. Now, in addition to this, what other public services may we have missed? Are there other things that we should take note of? Feel free to share those on your Slido now. What do you see as important that maybe wasn't on this list previously? So out of the 9 different things that were listed, is there something that we didn't include? Community gardens are a main part of more and more urban communities, and seeing that Harris County is no exception, but also that we need to make sure that that can be provided even more so. Now, realizing that with health services is that oftentimes we don't provide what is needed for the homeless themselves unless we're going through the Coalition for the Homeless, the COC itself, but realizing the need to make sure that that is a priority. Now, continuing to emphasize job training, but also job placement. Are there services that are being provided for people not just to have the training that they need, but also to get into those jobs themselves? Postpartum services, oftentimes, those who are going through pregnancy and have given birth, oftentimes the services end at birth. So how can we continue to provide services as needed for those who may be struggling in ways afterwards, as well as dealing with issues of mental health among youth, which has gone up since COVID, and realizing the need for better food access, especially with so many areas being food deserts throughout our service area. So feel free to continue to contribute capacity building for CBO, whether we're looking at community businesses and the like, or whether we're even looking at the central business district as a whole. But how can we make sure that capacity building goes even beyond downtown itself? So let's see a bit more about what we have for prioritizing. Now, in our other initiatives, we do have clearance and demolition. So different dilapidated buildings that need to be taken down. And currently we do have 150,000 that's going toward that in 2022. But we want to see beyond just these. What are other thoughts, other comments, other contributions that you see for our planning? Now, with entitlement funding, are there other types of projects or activities that you would like to see the county pursue with our entitlement funding? Any things that have not been listed already? So in addition to what we had for services for the homeless, for renters, for homeowners, for infrastructure, for facilities, public services, what are some other things that we want to make sure that we are emphasizing and making sure that we have considered for entitlement funding? Okay. And mental health is currently our big winner. So as you are thinking of different things that you believe entitlement funding should be considered for, feel free to post them here. Or of course, as you are able to give us feedback by email later on, you are also welcome to let us know different thoughts that you have about that as well. We have two more that are coming in. Diversion services. All right, great. So helping people to avoid the issues in the first place. And let's take just a few more seconds and see what other people are contributing as well. Ooh, all right, good point. All right, so notice that some of our funding can go towards parts of our community, those who are other stakeholders in our area, and also seeing how it is that we can make this a priority. Notice that we have single family housing, multifamily housing, realizing that the next generation is finding it harder and harder to get into home ownership in the first place. So how can we make each of those things a possibility? But also noticing with SOAR, the outreach, access, and recovery, and each of these things that are needed to help with benefits that go towards eligible children and youth, and realizing their connection to our continuum of care, our Coalition for the Homeless, okay? And even navigating the housing landscape, realizing that with the landscape the way it is that there are different options, but also sometimes people don't know how to get into the housing in the first place, and CERT training as well. So let's go ahead and take a look beyond this, and let's get a little bit more feedback from you, the community, right? So as we're looking at each of these things, do you believe that there are some ways in which Harris County could better reach your community? So feel free to give us, this is an open text poll, okay? What are some ways that you believe that Harris County could better reach your community? We're happy to do this meeting today. We're looking forward to more opportunities to interact with you in the future. But are there some things that maybe we've been missing or ignoring that would be best for helping to connect with you in the future? So are there some ways in which Harris County can better reach your community? And not even just the community in general, what about you specifically? People that you know, the neighborhood that you live in. What could we be doing? Let's take a few more seconds. Let's give people a chance to write out their text. Let's give it another 15 seconds. So realizing that the meetings, not only do we need to have a longer period of time to make people aware of the meetings, as well as more venues for learning about the meetings, but then also making sure that the meetings are not just available during the daytime, but also in the evening when fewer people are working. Let's make sure that we are utilizing our social media better, more effectively, like Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And as we notice right now, we're doing this presentation in English. How many residents are there in our communities that speak Spanish, Vietnamese, Mandarin Chinese? How can we continue to provide more language engagement for the community to be aware of not only what's out there, but also how they themselves can contribute to what we're doing going forward? How others can give feedback beyond just English speakers? Oh, great. Community-based organizations. There are a lot of groups that are, not just countywide, not just statewide, but even federal, that are able to connect with neighborhoods and communities even better than we can, or being able to connect with those that we weren't even aware of in the first place. And also, do we have opportunities for childcare when people attend meetings? Um, are there messengers that are more trusted? The world is filled with news where we doubt and discredit it many times. Are there people that we trust who are providing us information about these meetings? And there are a lot of people that cannot necessarily access Slido or PowerPoint or Zoom or Teams. Are there in-person meetings for people who don't have access to technology in the same way? Now, we've been going through a lot of this, okay? We are doing our best to make sure that we are connecting with you, the community, and whether or not we are making sure not only that we inform you, but also that we hear back from you. So we want to make sure that we also find out even from you. What do you think of the presentation today? Do you feel like we've been doing a good job with the presentation today? Do you feel like we've done all right, but maybe we could use some improvement? Maybe you think it's just really like abysmal. You just need to let us know that. What do you think? And we realize that not every one of our previous presentations has necessarily been the best. How have we improved that today? Have we not? So what do you see as our score, 1 to 5, 5 hopefully being the best, 1 not as much so, on what we've done with our presentation today? And our results that we got? All right, we've got a score of about 4.3. All right, a few people thought that it was a little bit better. All right, we'll take that as a win for sure. Now, of course, we do want to make sure that we acknowledge that, hey, maybe there are some of you who are neutral, like, this is okay, but we can improve. As we give you our email address and other opportunities to contact us, feel free to let us know what could we be doing to make this presentation and others better for you and for others going forward. Now, we do want to also make sure that we just give you a little bit of free space. So, oops, there's a number 2. That's never fun. Now, are there any additional comments that you want to make about the annual action plan that we have given to you today? So we've shown you not what we are going to do for the annual action plan, because that's why we're getting your feedback today. But what we have shown you is some of the different types of activities and different priorities that have happened over the last few years, as well as asking you to let us know, how do you feel we should prioritize things? But maybe there are some comments about this annual action plan that we are working toward, the 2023 annual action plan that will be starting in October. What are some things that maybe you feel you'd like to comment? Maybe some things that have not fit quite so nicely in the previous polls or the word clouds and the like. Is there any information that you just want us to be aware of that maybe we're just haven't provided an opportunity for you to share so far? Comments, questions, ideas, even, hopefully something beyond deciding whether or not this color shirt works for me or not. I think it does. I also like greens and blues, the occasional black and gray. But what are some things that you want to make sure that we are aware of? What are some other comments that you see that you want to make sure you provide? Let's take a few more seconds. Let's give it about maybe another 15, 20 seconds. What would you like to make sure that you've commented on with us today? Make sure that we are aware of. And in a sense, this is a free-for-all, hopefully a very nice free-for-all, but a chance for you to go beyond the box of what you've seen so far. Any particular comments? Okay, we'll give it just a few more seconds. More access to data on how the money is being used. Absolutely. As we look at each year's CAPER, we realize that we are able to report out what it is that we are doing each year with the funding provided with the entitlement funds, as well as any things that are related to that. Now, the data itself, maybe we should go ahead and go back, reevaluate, and make sure that we're expressing and explaining that data in a more understandable, but also more transparent way. And that's something we should definitely consider going forward, because the money is from the community. then the community has the right to know how it's being spent. And keep funding projects that are working post CARES and ARPA projects. So a lot of times it's good to have these initiatives, but then once they're over, oftentimes our emphasis is just gone and we don't realize the need that some of these projects may need continued funding and support going forward. So as much as we are able, how can we continue to support these going forward? Now, I want to make sure that we let you know of a few things before we finish up for today. Okay. Now, we are also getting ready for our community engagement for the 2024 to 2028 consolidated plan. So we've been really glad to get your feedback for the upcoming annual action plan, which goes from October of 2023 to the end of September 2024. But our next consolidated plan starts in October of 2024, which means we need to begin getting feedback from the community, from you, as soon as possible. If you would like to stay informed about the consolidated plan and our future community engagement, feel free to email us at hc.consolidatedplan@csd.hctx.net. So what we see here, HC Consolidated Plan at csd.hctx.net is specifically for the 2024 to 2028 Consolidated Plan. Feel free to email us there and we'll make sure that we get you the information that you need going forward. These community meetings should be starting in this summer. So even though we are currently doing the annual action plan for 2023, the consolidated plan that starts in 2024, our community meetings will be starting this summer. So be sure to be aware of that. Keep that on your calendar and make sure you stay up to date with what we're making you aware of and doing with our community engagement. 3 things we want to make sure that you take note of as we're finishing up today. If you have not had the opportunity to take our survey for the annual action plan, it continues until April 22nd. That's 3 days from now, so Saturday. Feel free to go to the annual action plan page on our website. So csd.harriscounty.tx.gov, csd.harriscountytx.gov. And if you go to our annual action plan page, it will then provide a link to the survey that you can continue to fill out until Saturday. Note the consolidated plan meetings that we'll be hosting this summer, but also the email address that we just showed a few moments ago, hcconsolidatedplan@csd.hctx.net, if you'd like to stay connected in preparation for that plan. We really appreciate that you've been taking the time and attention for us today to look at what we are considering for the annual action plan in 2023. If you'd like to have any additional questions about the process or also the request for proposal process that will be coming up for that annual action plan, feel free to contact Tasha Hicks, who is over development. You can reach her at plancomments@csd.hctx.net if you have questions about the annual action plan, or reach out to her at rfp@csd.hctx.net if you have questions in regard to the RFP process. And of course, if you want to see not just the survey for the annual action plan in 2023, but also any of our previous annual action plans, feel free to visit that website for the annual action plan under the csd.harriscountytx.gov/pages/annual-action-plan.aspx website there. Thank you for giving us a chance to present this to you. We hope to continue to hear from you at our email address or at our future meetings that we will be having this summer. And just remember, we are continuing to make sure that you, the community, are not just aware of what's happening, but also that you get to be a part of planning it as well. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time.